The porcelain vase, a cherished wedding gift from my beloved Richard, shattered against the wall, its delicate fragments scattering like cruel accusations. "You manipulative witch!" my son Mark roared, his face a mask of scarlet fury I'd never seen aimed at me, only now it wasn't for me, not directly. His wrath, raw and shaking the very foundations of my home, was unleashed upon her, Sarah, my daughter-in-law, who stood opposite him, a venomous smirk twisting her otherwise angelic features. The air crackled with a tension so thick you could taste the bitterness, a metallic tang of impending disaster that had been brewing in this house for far too long, festering beneath a thin veneer of false peace. "Don't you dare raise your voice at me, Mark." Sarah's voice, usually a sweet, soft melody designed to lull unsuspecting ears, now cut through the heavy silence like a razor blade. Her eyes, usually so calculating and cold, flashed with a dangerous fire, a reflection of the unholy war she had meticulously ignited within our once peaceful family. She took a deliberate step closer to him, her chin jutted out in defiance, her hands balled into tight fists at her sides, embodying the very essence of a cornered viper ready to strike, radiating an arrogance that defied belief, considering the chaos she had unleashed upon us all. "I am Eleanor Vance, or at least I was Eleanor Vance. A woman who not so long ago commanded respect, whose life was a tapestry woven with threads of love, stability, and quiet dignity. But in a brutal systematic campaign that felt like a slow, agonizing suffocation, Sarah, my daughter-in-law, had stripped me of every single thread. She seized my cherished home, the very walls that had echoed with laughter and love for 5 decades. She twisted my son's heart against me, slowly poisoning his mind with lies and suspicions, and she relentlessly chipped away at my spirit, until all that remained was a hollowed-out shell, barely clinging to the last vestiges of my former self. You call this raising my voice? Mark's words were laced with a bitter laugh, a sound of utter despair that tore at my heart. He gestured wildly around the living room, a chaotic scene of upturned furniture and scattered papers, a testament to the raw, visceral argument that had been raging for the better part of an hour. This is rage, Sarah. This is the sound of a man who's finally waking up to the truth, to the monster he married, to the way you've destroyed my mother, my children, and everything I ever held dear. He stepped forward, his eyes burning with a desperate plea for her to somehow confess, to admit to the unspeakable things she had done, to finally reveal the darkness that had consumed her. Sarah's smirk widened, chilling me to the bone, a predatory glint entering her eyes as if she relished his pain, thrived on his brokenness. "Oh, Mark," she purred, her voice dripping with mock sympathy. "You're just confused. Your mother, dear Eleanor, has been, shall we say, unwell for quite some time. It's sad, really, to see her decline. All these accusations, these truths you speak of, are simply the ramblings of a fragile mind, a poor woman who can no longer distinguish reality from her own delusions, a consequence of her unfortunate deterioration." She glanced at me, a quick fleeting look of pure malice that promised more torment, a chilling reminder of the twisted game she had been playing all along. My blood ran cold. She was using my supposed fragility, her meticulously constructed narrative of my decline, as a shield, a weapon. The way she uttered the word unwell was a dagger to my heart, a painful reminder of the carefully orchestrated incidents she had manufactured to paint me as senile, to isolate me, to make my own son doubt my sanity. This wasn't just about money or possessions. It was about my very existence, my mind, my dignity. The battle lines were not merely drawn. They were etched in fire, threatening to consume our entire family in an inferno of deceit and betrayal, leaving nothing but ashes behind. "Don't you dare talk about my mother like that," Mark roared again, lunging forward. He stopped short, his hand hovering, as if an invisible barrier held him back, a barrier of years of manipulation and carefully planted seeds of doubt. "She is not unwell. You are unwell, Sarah. You are sick, twisted, and you have systematically dismantled this family for your own selfish gain. What have you done with Mom's investments? Where is Richard's antique watch? The one he specifically left for me?" His voice cracked with genuine pain, the agony of a son realizing he'd been played for a fool, a puppet in a sinister play of her making, blinded by a love that was never real. Sarah let out a cruel, triumphant laugh, a sound that grated on my nerves like fingernails on a chalkboard. "Oh, those old things? Probably misplaced, dear Mark. Your mother, you know how she is always losing things. Or perhaps in one of her moments, she simply gave them away. Who can say with certainty what happens in the mind of someone so confused? She emphasized the word confused with a sickening relish, her gaze once again darting towards me, a clear challenge, a silent warning that if I dared to speak, if I dared to contradict her, the consequences would be swift and brutal, a public humiliation far worse than anything I had endured so far. I stood there, a silent witness to my family's implosion, a ghost in my own home. My voice, once strong and clear, felt trapped in my throat, choked by the sheer weight of her lies and my own despair. This wasn't just a fight. It was an execution of my spirit, a public dismantling of my identity. Every word Sarah uttered was designed to erode not just Mark's trust in me, but my own belief in myself, forcing me to question my memories, my perceptions, my very sanity, pushing me to the brink of utter mental collapse. "You're lying, Sarah," Mark bellowed, his face inches from hers, his body trembling with unleashed fury. "I know you're lying. I heard you on the phone talking about finalizing the paperwork for the house, selling Mom's assets. This house, my childhood home. You're trying to kick her out, aren't you? You're trying to take everything she has, everything my father worked his whole life for, and leave her with nothing." The accusation hung heavy in the air. A truth so horrifying it seemed to suck all the oxygen from the room, leaving us gasping for breath in the suffocating reality of her treachery. Sarah's eyes narrowed, her mask of composure finally cracking, revealing a flicker of something raw and desperate. "And if I am Mark? What are you going to do about it? You have no power here. You're just a naive boy, completely out of your depth." Her voice dropped to a sinister whisper, barely audible above the ringing in my ears. "Eleanor has no idea what's truly coming for her. No idea at all." And then from the floorboards beneath the ancient Persian rug, a faint rhythmic scratching began, almost imperceptible, a sound that would soon unravel a truth far more sinister, and far more liberating, than any of us could possibly imagine. That scratching sound from beneath the rug? It wasn't a mouse or the settling of an old house. It was the desperate, frantic scrabbling of my own memories, fighting to break free from the carefully constructed cage Sarah had built around them. It was the universe, or perhaps Richard's spirit, trying to remind me that this nightmare didn't just appear overnight. This wasn't some sudden explosion. It was a slow-motion catastrophe, building brick by insidious brick, until it finally shattered our lives. Looking back, the signs were all there, subtle at first, then growing bolder, more brazen, like a shadow lengthening until it swallowed the light. It truly began after my husband, Richard, passed. He was my rock, my anchor. When he left, I was adrift, heartbroken, navigating a grief so profound it felt like a physical weight in my chest. Sarah, my seemingly compassionate daughter-in-law, saw an opening. She moved in ostensibly to help me cope, to manage the house, to ease my burden. And I, in my raw, vulnerable state, welcomed her with open arms, seeing her as a loving extension of the family I so desperately clung to. I remember thinking how lucky I was to have such a caring daughter-in-law. Oh, the bitter irony of it all. Her help started innocently enough. "Eleanor, darling, let me handle the bills. You've got so much on your plate." Or, "Mom, you look tired, why don't I take care of the grocery shopping today?" Gradually it evolved. My financial statements started arriving at her email address. My social calendar, once bustling with bridge games and garden club meetings, dwindled to nothing, every invitation met with a polite, yet firm, "Eleanor isn't feeling up to it today." She wasn't just managing my life. She was meticulously taking it over, brick by agonizing brick, until my world shrunk to the four walls of my increasingly lonely home, and Sarah was the sole gatekeeper. My son Mark, bless his naive heart, was caught in her web like a fly in amber. He's a good man truly, but he's always been easily swayed by emotion. A bleeding heart in a world that often demands a tougher exterior. Sarah was a master manipulator, weaving a narrative of my fragility and fading memory, so convincingly that even he started to question my capabilities. She'd sigh dramatically, "Oh, Mom just had another one of her senior moments," after I'd misplaced my glasses, which she'd usually find in a ridiculous place like the freezer. These were small, seemingly harmless incidents, but strung together, they painted a picture of a woman losing her grip, a picture designed for Mark's eyes only. I remember my dear friend Susan, a retired lawyer with eyes as sharp as a hawk. She saw through Sarah almost immediately. "Eleanor," she'd say, her brow furrowed with concern. "There's something about Sarah, she's too solicitous, too eager to take control. Be careful." But I was so blinded by grief, so desperate for companionship, that I dismissed her warnings as overprotective mother henning. "Oh, Susan, you're just being paranoid." I'd laugh, waving away her concerns. How I wish I could go back and truly listen to her. Really hear the alarm bells she was ringing. My trusting nature, born from a lifetime of honesty, became my biggest weakness. The escalation was terrifyingly swift. First, it was the new locks on the doors. "For my safety," Sarah claimed, implying I was too forgetful to secure the house. Then my medications. She insisted on managing them, often giving me the wrong pills, or doses that left me feeling foggy and disoriented. I'd wake up feeling confused, unable to string a coherent thought together, reinforcing her narrative that I was declining. It was a cruel form of gaslighting, making me doubt my own mind, my own reality. Each incident, each senior moment, was a deliberate blow to my self-worth, systematically dismantling the proud woman I once was. The turning point, the moment I felt the true, chilling dread of her intentions, was last Christmas. Sarah had accidentally spilled red wine on Richard's cherished antique rug, then promptly blamed my clumsiness, claiming I jostled her arm. Mark, instead of defending me, just sighed, his eyes reflecting a growing weariness and suspicion that tore a hole in my heart. That day, I saw a flicker of the cold, calculating woman Sarah truly was, a brief glimpse of the predator lurking beneath the veneer of the devoted daughter-in-law. It was a terrifying revelation, but even then, I couldn't grasp the full extent of her evil. My own journey during those months was one of slow, painful degradation. From a vibrant matriarch who ran her household with grace and efficiency, I became a terrified, isolated woman, constantly second-guessing myself. I recall the countless nights I cried myself to sleep, clutching a faded photograph of Richard, whispering his name into the darkness, wondering where I had gone wrong. The meals Sarah refused to let me cook, claiming my shaky hands were a hazard. The conversations she deliberately cut short when friends called, insisting I was resting. The heartbreaking moments my grandchildren, Lily and Tom, looked at me with fear in their eyes, mirroring the lies Sarah had fed them about their sick grandmother. I was not just losing my possessions, I was losing myself, my very identity, piece by agonizing piece. The ultimate blow came when she pressured Mark to redraw my will. "It's for your own good, Mom," she'd coo, "to simplify things just in case. After all, with your condition, it's best to be prepared." Her voice was a silken trap, promising security while leading me to ruin. She had already installed a new financial advisor, a smooth-talking man named Robert Maxwell, whose eyes held a predatory glint that chilled me to the bone. He'd nod sagely as Sarah painted a picture of my alleged incompetence, urging me to sign away my future, to make her the sole beneficiary, claiming it was to protect my interests. I was utterly alone, fighting a battle I couldn't even comprehend, against an enemy cloaked in my son's affection. Just as I was about to sign that new will, the pen feeling impossibly heavy in my trembling hand, Sarah's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, and for the first time I saw it. Pure, unadulterated panic flashed across her face. "No," she whispered, her voice barely audible, her usual composure utterly shattered. "Not him. Not now." She quickly excused herself, leaving the incriminating document on the table, a sudden crack in her impenetrable facade. Who was him? And what secret could be so powerful that it rattled even Sarah, the woman who had systematically dismantled my life without a single flicker of remorse? This brief moment of vulnerability from her, this sudden break in her control, felt like a tiny crack in the wall, a sliver of hope that perhaps, just perhaps, her reign of terror wasn't as unshakable as it seemed. That name, him, echoing from Sarah's lips, sent a cold shiver down my spine that had nothing to do with the chill of my drafty old house. It wasn't just some random person, it was Robert Maxwell. The name clanged in my memory like a rusty gate. I'd heard whispers about him years ago, when Richard was still alive, a notoriously corrupt lawyer, known for preying on the vulnerable, especially the elderly. Suddenly, the fog in my mind, The one Sarah had so carefully cultivated with her medication management and constant put-downs, began to clear. This wasn't just Sarah being greedy. This was a meticulously planned sinister operation. She had a partner, a co-conspirator, and their hidden agenda was now terrifyingly clear. To strip me of everything, dismantle my life piece by piece, and then vanish with my inheritance. I started piecing together seemingly innocent conversations, fragments of whispers I dismissed as my own confusion. That distant cousin who suddenly started calling, asking strange questions about my finances. The neighborhood busybody who stopped by, subtly suggesting it was time to downsize. It all made a chilling, horrifying sense now. Even some of my own distant relatives, swayed by Sarah's constant stream of lies about my supposed senility, had been manipulated, turning their backs on me. But the deepest, most agonizing betrayal wasn't from them. It was from Mark. He had started bringing in medical professionals, seemingly legitimate doctors, who would subtly reinforce Sarah's narrative about my declining mental state. They'd ask odd questions, observe me with cold, clinical eyes, and then nod gravely at Sarah's whispered concerns. I'd felt like a specimen under a microscope, my protests dismissed as paranoia. It tore me apart that my own son, the boy I raised, could be so blind, so easily swayed. Now I understood why. These doctors weren't legitimate. Susan, my friend, later confirmed it. They were part of Robert Maxwell's shadowy network, paid to provide false diagnoses, to create a paper trail that would legally deem me incompetent. The betrayal was a festering wound, reminding me that the enemy wasn't just Sarah. It was an entire network of deceit. Just as this horrifying realization solidified, I felt a desperate need to reach out to Susan, to tell her everything. But it was impossible. Sarah, ever one step ahead, had installed surveillance cameras throughout the house, claiming it was for my safety. My phone, once my lifeline to the outside world, was constantly misplaced, conveniently found later with its battery dead. My internet access was restricted, emails accidentally deleted. Every avenue of communication was cut off, every escape route blocked. I was a prisoner in my own home, a gilded cage built by the woman who was systematically, ruthlessly stripping me of my rights and my sanity, preparing me for a silent, swift demise. Sarah's true nature, once carefully concealed beneath a veneer of false concern, now began to show through the cracks, a grotesque mask slipping to reveal the monster beneath. I witnessed her mocking my attempts to recall simple memories, twisting my words until they sounded nonsensical. She delighted in sowing discord between me and my grandchildren, planting seeds of fear and distrust in their young minds. I once overheard her on the phone, her voice dripping with venom, describing me to someone as a senile old hag who just needs to be put out of her misery. She reveled in my helplessness, her eyes gleaming with a malicious satisfaction that turned my stomach. This wasn't just about money, it was about power, about control, about utterly erasing me. The stakes, already impossibly high, were about to skyrocket. One evening I overheard Sarah on the phone, her voice hushed, urgent. "The appraisal's next week," she whispered, a triumphant edge to her tone. "We need to get her out before then. The house is worth a fortune, and we can't risk any sentimental attachments getting in the way." My heart seized in my chest, a cold, hard knot of fear. They weren't just trying to take my money. They were going to sell my home, Richard's home, the only place I had ever known, the place where we had built our entire lives together, brick by loving brick, memory by cherished memory. The thought of strangers trampling through our past, then demolishing it, was unbearable. I was facing imminent homelessness, and with it, the complete erasure of every memory tied to this beloved place. This wasn't just about losing my future, it was about losing my past forever. That very night, while Sarah was out, attending what she called a business meeting, likely with Robert Maxwell, I couldn't sleep. My mind raced, reliving every betrayal, every calculated lie. Driven by an inexplicable urge, I wandered into Richard's old study, a room Sarah rarely entered, deeming it cluttered. My hand brushed against a loose panel in his antique mahogany desk, a hidden compartment I'd never known existed. Inside, nestled among his old letters and dried flowers, was a small leather-bound journal. It wasn't his, though. The handwriting was distinctly feminine, elegant, yet hurried, filled with furious slashing strokes. It was Sarah's, As I opened it, my heart hammering against my ribs, the first line I read sent a shiver down my spine, a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. He thinks he has me fooled, but I'm just getting started. Eleanor has no idea what's coming. My blood ran cold, then boiled with a furious heat. This journal was her deepest secret, a roadmap to her malevolence, and it held the key to everything. The discovery of that journal, Sarah's meticulously wicked roadmap to my ruin, was a shock that rippled through me. On one hand, it felt like a miracle, a sliver of hope in the suffocating darkness. On the other, the sheer malice contained within its pages terrified me to my core. Her entries detailed her intricate plan. How to subtly isolate me, how to poison Mark's mind against me, and even chilling instructions on how to subtly accelerate my perceived cognitive decline. Reading her cold, calculated notes on how to destroy me, written in her own hand, pushed me to my absolute limits. The weight of her betrayal, combined with my complete powerlessness to stop her, was a crushing burden that threatened to extinguish the last flicker of my will. I remember that night, curled up in my bed, the journal clutched so tightly to my chest that the leather left imprints on my skin. Tears streamed down my face, hot and relentless. Was this truly the end? Had I lost everything and everyone I loved? The agonizing realization that my own son, the boy I had raised with so much love, could be so easily swayed, that his loyalty to me was so fragile, was a deeper cut than any financial loss. I saw myself not as Eleanor Vance, the strong, capable woman I once was, but as a hollowed-out shell, a ghost haunting her own life, utterly defeated by the forces arrayed against her. Looking back, my own naive trust in Sarah had been a critical flaw. My willingness to believe in her initial kindness, even as red flags popped up, had led me to this precipice. My desire to avoid conflict, to keep the family together at all costs, had blinded me to the insidious nature of her plan, to the slow, steady erosion of my life. I realized then that my own passive nature, my inability to confront the ugliness head-on, had in a way enabled her. The consequences were devastating. Not only had I lost my home and my financial security, but my relationship with my son was fractured beyond recognition, and my grandchildren were being turned against me. I was paying the ultimate price for my blindness. The day the appraisers arrived felt like the absolute end. Robert Maxwell, Sarah's slimy lawyer, led them through my home with an air of smug triumph. They strode through the rooms, cold and calculating, measuring and documenting, as if I were already gone, a ghost that no one could see or hear. Sarah walked beside them, a triumphant gleam in her eyes, barely concealing her glee, whispering hushed instructions, pointing out features, already imagining her ill-gotten gains. Mark was conveniently called away on business. A flimsy excuse that stung more than any direct insult. As they discussed the potential sale price of my beloved home, I felt a deep, crushing despair settle over me. This was it. Everything was lost. My life, my memories, my very identity were being ripped away, sold off to the highest bidder. As the appraisers prepared to leave, their task seemingly complete, Robert Maxwell paused at the doorway, a cruel smile playing on his lips. "Such a beautiful home, Eleanor," he said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "A shame it won't be yours much longer. Such a pity." His words, intended to break me completely, to crush any last spark of hope, instead ignited a tiny burning ember of defiance deep within the ashes of my despair. I looked down at the journal still hidden in my pocket, its weight a sudden comfort. He thought he had one. Sarah thought she had one. But they hadn't accounted for the truth. And the truth, I realized with a sudden fierce clarity, was about to set me free. That spark, small as it was, began to flicker into a flame. I knew in that moment that I had to act. But how? I was still trapped, still isolated, a prisoner in my own home. My mind raced, searching for an opening, any crack in their impenetrable wall. Then a faint scratching sound came from beneath my bed. It wasn't the usual creaking of the old house settling, or the wind rattling the windows. It was a rhythmic, almost deliberate scratching, a sound that seemed to be calling to me. My heart pounded in my chest. Could it be? Could it possibly be Susan, my loyal friend, finally finding a way to reach me? A desperate hope, fragile yet insistent, began to bloom in my shattered heart. That scratching, that faint, persistent sound from beneath my bed, wasn't Susan. My heart, which had leaped with a desperate hope, sank with a thud. But what I did find was just as profound, maybe even more so. My fingers fumbled in the dusty darkness, and then they brushed against it. A small, worn envelope, tucked away in a hidden compartment of the old wooden floorboard. Richard, always the meticulous one, always thinking 3 steps ahead, had designed this house with secrets. Inside the envelope wasn't a letter or a trinket, but something far more powerful, something that would turn Sarah's whole twisted world upside down. A hidden will. But not just any will. This was a living trust, drafted by Richard years ago, before his illness, before Sarah even truly entered our lives. It was a masterpiece of legal foresight, designed specifically to protect my assets and me from manipulation, from predators like Sarah. The ultimate game-changer was a specific, ironclad clause. Any attempts to alter this trust by force, by fraud, or by coercion would render the new fraudulent will null and void. And then the breath hitched in my throat. It stated that in the event of my mental incapacitation, precisely the scenario Sarah was trying to orchestrate, a designated trustee, not Mark or Sarah, would manage my affairs. And that trustee was Susan, my loyal, sharp-witted friend. Sarah's entire elaborate scheme, built on her fraudulent will, was worthless. It was a dead letter. This discovery didn't just flip the script, it detonated it. Everything I thought I knew about Sarah's plan, about my utter helplessness, dissolved into a furious certainty. Her months of meticulous orchestration, her cunning manipulations, the legal documents she'd pressured me to sign, all of it was rendered meaningless by Richard's genius, by his foresight, by his enduring love. What I had believed was a simple, brutal betrayal by Sarah was, in fact, a carefully orchestrated criminal conspiracy involving multiple parties. But Richard, my brilliant, loving Richard, had anticipated such a scenario and had subtly, brilliantly protected me from beyond the grave. It was like he was still here, fighting for me, guiding my hand. The journal, which I now clutched, revealed an even deeper, more sickening layer of deception. Sarah wasn't just manipulating Mark for her own gain. She was also secretly communicating with a woman named Brenda. The name struck me. Brenda was a former secretary of Richard's, a woman who had always harbored a bitter grudge against him after he had to let her go years ago due to some questionable financial dealings on her part. And Brenda, driven by that old resentment, had been providing Sarah with crucial, insider information about Richard's business dealings, including the existence of the living trust. But it was clear from Sarah's scrawled notes that she hadn't fully grasped its full, devastating legal implications. This connection explained everything: how Sarah had such intimate, precise knowledge of Richard's finances, his habits, even the hidden compartments in his desk. It was a betrayal from within, from someone who knew our family secrets. This newfound knowledge brought with it not just relief, but a surging wave of determination. I finally had an undeniable ally in Susan, the designated trustee, who, bless her heart, was completely unaware of this hidden, powerful document until now. But it also revealed a new, more dangerous enemy in Brenda, who was clearly still bitter and willing to aid Sarah in her vile schemes. The stakes, already impossibly high, were now magnified. Brenda's involvement meant Sarah had access to even more privileged, damaging information about Richard's past, which she could twist and use against me. It was a race against time, a battle for not just my future, but for Richard's legacy, for the very memory of him. With the knowledge of the living trust and the damning evidence from Sarah's own journal, I finally had the ammunition I needed to fight back. But how? That was the suffocating question. Sarah was meticulous, cunning, and powerful, controlling every aspect of my existence within these 4 walls. I was still trapped, physically weak from months of neglect and emotional exhaustion, emotionally drained from the constant barrage of lies and gaslighting. The tension in the house was unbearable, a silent, ticking bomb. I had the truth, the irrefutable, explosive truth, but I needed to get it out, and time was rapidly running out before the scheduled sale of my home. The silence in the house now felt like a predator stalking its prey, and I knew with a chilling certainty that the next move I made would either shatter Sarah's entire world or permanently seal my own tragic fate. Just as this agonizing thought solidified in my mind, I heard her footsteps approaching my room. Sarah. Her steps were deliberate, measured, like a hunter closing in on its prey. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. I quickly shoved the journal and the living trust back under the floorboard, my hands trembling, trying to keep my breathing even. The door creaked open slowly, a long drawn-out groan that echoed the one in my soul. Sarah stood there, framed in the doorway, her eyes narrowed to slits, a glint of chilling suspicion in them. "What are you doing, Eleanor?" she asked, her voice dangerously soft, barely a whisper, yet it felt like a shout in the terrifying quiet. Before I could even begin to stammer an answer, she took a slow, deliberate step into the room, and I saw something flash in her hand. A small, sharp, metallic object that caught the dim light. My blood ran cold. Was this it? Was she finally going to silence me forever? The object in Sarah's hand wasn't a weapon in the traditional sense, but in that moment it felt just as deadly. It was a simple, gleaming letter opener, one of Richard's, that she'd likely found, and was now brandishing with a chilling, almost playful menace. "Just tidying up," I managed to stammer, my voice a thin, reedy whisper, betraying the hurricane of terror raging inside me. She seemed to buy it, or at least she pretended to, but her gaze lingered on me, a deep-seated suspicion flickering in her narrowed eyes. That moment, though, was my true turning point. With the journal and the living trust burning a hole in my mind, I realized I could no longer afford to be a victim, no longer afford to cower. The reckoning began not with a dramatic bang, but with a quiet, steely resolve that hardened my very bones. My first act of defiance, my secret rebellion, was to reach Susan. I remembered a hidden prepaid phone Richard had installed for emergencies, tucked away behind a loose brick in the old fireplace. Sarah, in all her cunning, had never discovered it. My fingers, trembling with a mixture of fear and adrenaline, punched in Susan's number. Hearing her voice on the other end, strong and clear, was like a lifeline thrown to a drowning woman. I poured out the entire horrifying story. Sarah's systematic abuse, the hidden journal, the damning words within, Brenda's involvement, and most importantly, the existence of Richard's living trust, the ultimate weapon against Sarah's schemes. Hearing her gasp of outrage, her unwavering promise of support, ignited a strength I hadn't realized I still possessed. The paralyzing fear that had gripped me for months began to dissipate, replaced by a fierce, burning determination. Eleanor Vance was back, and I was ready to fight. Susan, a retired lawyer with decades of experience fighting for justice, wasted no time. She moved with a speed and precision that Sarah, in all her arrogance, could never have predicted. Susan immediately began gathering evidence, building an airtight case against Sarah and her accomplice Robert Maxwell. The first public confrontation, the true beginning of Sarah's downfall, was a masterpiece of strategic timing. Susan, accompanied by a stern-faced police officer, arrived at my home. Sarah, caught completely off guard, her carefully constructed world momentarily fracturing, tried to deny them entry, blustering about privacy and respecting my condition. But Susan, with the legal documents, including a court order, forced her hand. The shock on Sarah's face when she saw me, no longer frail and defeated, but standing tall, my head held high beside Susan, was priceless. It was the first crack in her fortress of lies. That initial legal challenge was a public humiliation for Sarah. Susan, in a swift and devastating move, filed an injunction to halt the sale of my cherished home, presenting Richard's living trust as irrefutable proof of Sarah's fraudulent intent. The very foundation of Sarah's monstrous scheme crumbled beneath her feet. News of the legal battle, thanks to Susan's carefully placed tips to local reporters, started to leak to the local media. The whispers turned into headlines, and Sarah's carefully constructed image as the devoted daughter-in-law began to shatter. Her lies, meticulously documented in her own hand within that journal, were exposed, and her carefully crafted world began to unravel. Robert Maxwell, the slimy lawyer, sensing the shifting tide, began to distance himself, leaving Sarah increasingly isolated, abandoned by the very people she thought she controlled. The pressure mounted relentlessly. The court date was set, a looming showdown that promised to expose every last one of Sarah's dark secrets. Sarah, desperate, lashed out with a desperate, frantic smear campaign against me. She used every last ounce of her manipulative energy, twisting facts, claiming I was delusional, fabricating outlandish stories, even trying to portray herself as my victim. But it was too late. The evidence Susan had amassed, especially the damning, undeniable entries from Sarah's own journal, was overwhelming. a tidal wave of truth that no amount of spin could deflect. The prosecutor, armed with Sarah's own words, painted a vivid picture of her cruel, calculated deception. The climactic showdown was now inevitable, a public battle that would rip open every wound, expose every dark secret, and finally decide the fate of my family and my future. The courtroom became a battleground, a public stage where the masks would finally fall. I knew with a certainty that chilled me to the bone that one of us would walk away victorious, vindicated, and the other would lose absolutely everything. There was no going back, no room for retreat. This was it. The final act of a brutal personal war was about to begin, and I was ready, no longer a victim but a warrior. As I walked into the courthouse on the day of the trial, the air crackled with a palpable tension, thick with anticipation. Photographers flashed their cameras, reporters scribbled furiously in their notebooks, all eyes on the drama unfolding. Sarah sat across from me, her face pale, her eyes burning with a desperate, cornered fury. Her defiance, once so unwavering, was now laced with a raw fear that she could barely conceal. But it wasn't her gaze that sent a jolt through me, that made my breath catch in my throat. It was Mark. He was there, sitting beside Sarah, his face pale, his shoulders slumped, his eyes fixed on me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. Was it regret? Shame? Or something else entirely? Something still clouded by the lies he had been fed? His presence was an unexpected complication, a reminder of the personal stakes beyond the legal battle, and it tightened the knot of anticipation in my stomach. The courtroom buzzed with an electric energy, a sea of hushed whispers and curious stares, all eyes fixed on the drama about to unfold. This wasn't just a legal proceeding. It was a public execution of Sarah's carefully constructed lies, and I, Eleanor Vance, was no longer merely a witness, but the living testament to her cruelty. The final confrontation began, and Sarah, represented by a flustered, inexperienced lawyer, Robert Maxwell, having predictably abandoned his sinking ship, launched a desperate, flailing attempt to discredit me. She spun a convoluted tale of my supposed mental decline, presenting carefully doctored medical documents and bringing in biased expert testimonies, all designed to paint me as delusional, as a woman prone to elaborate fantasies. But I was no longer the fragile, easily swayed woman she had preyed upon. Susan, my formidable advocate, my loyal friend, stood beside me, radiating quiet confidence. She systematically, painstakingly dismantled every single one of Sarah's lies. Her voice, calm and steady, filled the courtroom as she presented Richard's living trust, a legal masterpiece that instantly rendered Sarah's fraudulent will worthless. The court clerk read sections aloud, and the weight of Richard's foresight, his unwavering protection, hung in the air, leaving Sarah speechless, her jaw slack with disbelief. Then came the devastating blow, the ultimate weapon. The journal. Sarah's own words, her private confessions, her meticulous planning of my ruin, laid bare for all to hear. The prosecutor, his voice booming with righteous indignation, read excerpts aloud. Every calculated manipulation, every cruel thought, every illicit meeting with Robert Maxwell, every scheme with Brenda, meticulously documented in Sarah's own hand. The courtroom gasped as her cold, calculating malice was exposed, raw and undeniable. Sarah's face contorted, a horrifying mix of fury and despair, her carefully constructed facade crumbling into dust. Her eyes darted from me to Mark, then back to the prosecutor, like a cornered animal, desperate to escape the trap she had sprung on herself. The truth, raw and undeniable, was laid bare, leaving her with nowhere to hide. The transformation in that moment was complete. Sarah, once the powerful manipulator, the architect of my misery, was now a pathetic, trembling figure, exposed and humiliated under the harsh glare of justice. I, the victim she had tried to erase, the woman she had systematically broken, stood tall, vindicated, radiating a quiet strength that came from knowing the truth had prevailed. The role reversal was absolute, undeniable. She was the one facing public scrutiny, facing legal consequences that would shatter her life, while I was reclaiming my dignity, my home, my very existence. The tables had turned, and the force of karma was a tangible presence in the room. The judge, a stern woman with a reputation for unwavering fairness, listened intently, her gaze piercing. After reviewing the overwhelming evidence, especially the undeniable proof from Sarah's own journal, She delivered a swift and decisive verdict. Sarah was found guilty of fraud, elder abuse, and attempted theft of property. The living trust was upheld, my home was secured, finally safe from her grasping hands, and a permanent restraining order was immediately issued against Sarah, ensuring she could never again darken my doorstep, never again poison my life. Furthermore, she announced that investigations into Robert Maxwell's and Brenda's roles in the conspiracy were officially initiated, with the promise of their own inevitable reckonings. The dramatic justice was palpable. The silence in the courtroom was broken only by Sarah's muffled sobs, a pathetic, strangled sound as she was led away by bailiffs, her dreams of ill-gotten wealth evaporating into thin air. As the courtroom slowly emptied, the hum of whispers fading, Mark approached me, his shoulders slumped, his eyes red-rimmed with tears. He looked utterly broken, a shadow of the strong man he once was, weighed down by the burden of his complicity, his blindness. "Mom," he choked out, his voice raw with regret. "I am so incredibly sorry. I didn't see it. I was so blind, so stupid. How could I have let her do this to you?" He reached out, his hand trembling as if seeking forgiveness, desperate to bridge the chasm that had opened between us. The battle was won, the legal nightmare was over, but the wounds of betrayal, especially from my own son, ran deeper than any financial loss. The immediate crisis was over, the monster had been exposed, but the journey to true healing, to the rebuilding of shattered relationships, was just beginning. The moral lesson was already taking shape in my mind. The truth always finds a way to reveal itself, but the path to redemption, to rebuilding what has been broken, is rarely easy. It requires time, patience, and a willingness to confront painful truths. As I stepped out of the courthouse, the setting sun casting long, dramatic shadows across the pavement, I felt a sense of liberation I hadn't known in years. But just as I thought it was truly over, a figure emerged from the crowd, a familiar face I hadn't seen in years, a face I wished I would never see again. It was Brenda, Sarah's accomplice, her eyes wide with fear, her hands trembling, clutching something tightly. "Eleanor," she whispered, her voice barely audible, a desperate plea. "There's something else you need to know. About Richard. Something that changes everything." The world spun again. The story wasn't over. Not yet. Brenda's words hung in the air, thick with unspoken secrets, colder than the evening breeze that suddenly swept through the courthouse grounds. About Richard. My late husband. The man who had been my rock, my love, my protector. What else could there possibly be? My heart, already raw from the day's events, lurched with a fresh wave of fear and confusion. Brenda, her face pale and drawn, her eyes darting nervously around as if expecting Sarah to materialize from the shadows, clutched a crumpled, faded photograph. It was a picture of Richard and me, young and smiling, on our honeymoon. My mind reeled. What could this woman, Sarah's accomplice, possibly reveal about Richard that I didn't already know? Then Brenda's confession tumbled out, a torrent of desperate words fueled by her own fear of facing justice. She admitted that Richard, knowing he was battling a serious illness and seeing the subtle manipulative tendencies in Sarah even before their marriage to Mark, had deliberately set up the living trust. He hadn't just appointed Susan as the trustee, he had subtly orchestrated a trail of breadcrumbs for me to find. The accidental loose floorboard in my room, the carefully placed emergency phone, even a specific cryptic note hidden in his old fishing tackle box that led me to the hidden compartment in his desk, it was all part of his plan. He had been leaving me the tools for my own survival, even from beyond the grave, predicting Sarah's malicious nature with chilling accuracy. This final act of love and foresight from Richard, this profound demonstration of his unwavering devotion, solidified the overarching moral lesson of this nightmare. The truth, when courageously sought and relentlessly pursued, will always prevail over deceit. Even in the darkest moments, the power of justice and the enduring strength of the human spirit can reclaim what was lost. The consequences for Sarah were swift and brutal. She was sentenced to several years in prison, her once glowing reputation shattered beyond repair, her life a wreckage of her own making, built on greed and lies. News of her crimes spread like wildfire. A cautionary tale whispered in hushed tones. Robert Maxwell, the slimy lawyer, was not only disbarred but faced serious criminal charges for his involvement in elder abuse and fraud. His carefully constructed empire of deceit crumbled, leaving him exposed and disgraced. Brenda, who had finally chosen to cooperate with authorities, received a reduced sentence for her testimony and began a long, difficult path towards redemption, haunted by her past but slowly, painstakingly, working to make amends. Mark, my son, humbled and heartbroken by the sheer magnitude of Sarah's deception and his own blindness, spent months working to earn back my trust, slowly, painfully. He sought therapy, desperate to understand how he could have been so easily manipulated, how he could have allowed his own mother to suffer so terribly. He actively worked to repair his relationship with me and crucially with his children Lily and Tom, who had been caught in Sarah's web of lies. It wasn't easy. There were tears, heated discussions, and painful truths spoken, but slowly, painstakingly, the chasm that had opened between us began to bridge. Today my home, once a silent prison, is once again filled with the warmth of love and the joyful sounds of life. Susan, my loyal, sharp-witted friend, remains a steadfast presence in my life, an invaluable advisor and a constant reminder that true friendship is a treasure beyond measure. Mark and I have rebuilt our bond, stronger and more honest than ever before. He has become a passionate advocate for elder rights, using his own painful experience to educate others about the insidious nature of manipulation and abuse, ensuring that other families don't fall prey to the same schemes. Lily and Tom, my beautiful grandchildren, initially confused and withdrawn, slowly began to understand the truth, and with Mark's unwavering guidance, they are now bright, thriving children who openly adore their grandmother, their eyes filled with love and trust, not fear. I spend my days tending to my cherished garden, volunteering at a local senior center, and most importantly, sharing my story. Not as a victim, but as a survivor, a woman who faced the darkest depths of betrayal and emerged stronger. My journey is a testament to the power of resilience. It shows that even when facing overwhelming odds, when stripped of everything you hold dear, the human spirit can find a way to fight back, to reclaim what was stolen. It's a powerful reminder that true strength isn't about physical prowess or material wealth, but about the unwavering courage to confront injustice, to relentlessly seek the truth, and to reclaim your dignity against all odds. I lost my home, my family, and almost my will to live, but by uncovering the truth, by refusing to be silenced, by fighting with every fiber of my being, I took it all back. So if you are reading this, if you are facing a similar struggle, if you feel lost, unheard, or victimized, remember my story. The truth is your most powerful weapon, a light that can cut through the thickest darkness. Don't give up. Don't be afraid to ask for help, to reach out to that one loyal friend. And always, always trust that small nagging voice inside you that whispers when something is wrong, when a situation feels off, when a person's kindness feels just a little too sweet. Because when you find that hidden journal, that piece of evidence, that undeniable truth, you too can reclaim your life, your dignity, and your destiny. The power to take it all back lies within you. The question is, what will you do with it? The answer, I pray, is to fight. Fight with everything you have.